Local productions seen on Delta College Public Media are made possible with support from viewers like you. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me for Junia Doan's The Spark. I'm Junia Doan, and my guest today is journalist and author John J. Miller. John is the director of the Dow Journalism Program at Hillsdale College and writes for National Review and the Wall Street Journal, among other publications. Welcome, John. Tell us about the Dow Journalism Program at Hillsdale.
The Dow Journalism Program is how we train students to prepare for careers in the media. It's where we train them to become storytellers in a variety of forms. It has a few components. We have a weekly campus newspaper, a printed newspaper that the students produce. We also have a radio station that is run and managed by students with a lot of original student content in spoken word format. And we also have a nascent and embryonic film program, a documentary filmmaking program that's all a part of this. So we're trying to train students to become proficient in print and audio and video. And there's also some coursework we do. Journalism here at Hillsdale College is a minor, it's not a major, which is what we like. We want students to major in a traditional academic discipline, but then we do a little bit of classroom work with them as well. But the way you learn journalism is by doing it. So we try and get them in the newsroom at the campus newspaper, get them behind a microphone in our radio station, or using their camera to film something.
I see. When I was growing up and reading the New York Times, there was seemingly no narrative, no story. They just started with, and this and that happened. Then came this idea that they start with an individual and that person's experience, and then go to the issue, so to speak, in general. What are you teaching currently? What is the style now?
Well, we're trying to teach them all kinds of ways of writing, but fundamentally we're trying to teach them how to report hard news. In other words, how to tell simple stories about what the speaker on campus said last night. What's the story behind the new business that opened downtown? What's the story about the football game over the weekend? Can you tell us a story about what happened there? And so a lot of it is just the fundamentals of how to write a lead, how to interview a source, how to quote, how to report pertinent information, in what order do we deliver it, and then put it into a newspaper or on a radio station.
Do you have any courses on what is truth or what is viewpoint, or seems to be a society-wide problem figuring out right now what is truth from people who are supposed to base it on their report on that? What?
That's a good question. And at one level, I think the whole college is dedicated to that. You know, it's a traditional liberal arts college with a strong core curriculum that involves coursework in history and English and the sciences and so forth. And you know, our president, President Arn, is famous for asking, what is the good? And getting students to try and answer that and learn how to answer it and what it even means. And so I think a lot of the college is, in fact, dedicated to that question. But you're asking how we do it in the newsroom. And we're just trying to get students to learn how to report facts and tell true stories. You know, we do have an opinions page, places where they can engage in argument and persuasion and so forth. But that's just 2 pages of what's a 12 or 14 page issue every week that just is trying to tell true stories about what's really going on our campus and in the town here.
Is any part of that investigative?
Sometimes students will work on projects that last several weeks where they're trying to learn information about something a little more complicated. But so much of what we're doing is just trying to teach them the fundamentals of how to write a lead. I mean, they come here, they don't know how to do that, and it's kind of a simple thing, but it does take practice. You have to learn how to do it. You have to learn the style and the formula of journalism so you can tell stories quickly for readers who want to learn. Older students may take on something a little bit more investigative that requires more interviews, more details, and that sort of thing. So they do get experience with that.
How many people choose it as a minor?
Well, it's about 8 to 12 a year. So we have a small campus. There are on the order of 15 or 1,600 students here. I went to the University of Michigan. I think there are fewer students on the campus of Hillsdale College than there were in my dorm in Ann Arbor. So it's a small place, but we're graduating students with a minor in journalism at a rate of about 8 to 12 a year. Sometimes it tops that.
Wow.
So we're making large investments in a small number of people.
Sounds good to me. Do they, after college, do they go on and stay in the field?
Oh, many do. So first of all, if you do that coursework here, if you pursue the minor in journalism and you want a job in the media, you're going to get one. Our students are in demand. They're really good coming in. It's kind of like the opposite of garbage in, garbage out. We get really high quality people coming in, and they're really high quality people coming out. We do train them up in journalism, and really anyone who wants a job in the media is going to get one. And we have a lot of alumni all over the place. At the Wall Street Journal editorial page, we have 4 alumni. We have a reporter in the newsroom at the Wall Street Journal, and an alumna. But they're everywhere. They're at the Detroit News. They're in Washington D.C. at the Washington Examiner and National Review in New York and many other places. They're really everywhere and in every kind of media.
Successful program. Do they apply, or anyone can sign up for the participation?
Anyone can get involved. So if you want to write for the campus newspaper, you can just write for the campus newspaper. You can treat it as an extracurricular activity. If you want to pursue the minor in journalism, you start to have some obligations to write for it and do a little bit of coursework as well. So depending on how you count, we're talking about 40 to 60 people every year are in the orbit of journalism, which means they're either pursuing the minor or they're just contributing occasionally, or maybe they have a radio show that they like to do once a week, so they can treat that as an extracurricular activity. But those who get really involved, they do the coursework, they eventually get the minor, and they have some great scholarship opportunities. We have scholarships that are available exclusively to students who pursue the minor. So if you do that with real diligence, you can get a fair amount of your education paid for through these journalism scholarships.
And when you were a student, you also participated as a volunteer in journalism at Michigan, yes?
Yeah, I was a student at the University of Michigan, and I was editor of a publication called the Michigan Review, which was the right of center, conservative / libertarian student newspaper on campus. So we competed with the Michigan Daily, which was like, if it was like the New York Times of campus in a sense, and we were like the National Review of campus. So we put out issues, we distributed them, we wrote about campus events, and had a good time doing it. But that's how I got my training, and that's how I learned how to do this, and it's what ultimately led me into the profession.
Interesting. And what made you be drawn to write books?
Well, I think anybody who's a writer thinks about writing books. And I know, why did I get in journalism? I think really comes down to the fact that I was a kid who liked to read and imagined becoming a writer, and did some writing and then did more in college. And you start to think about doing it professionally. You realize, there are people who make money doing this. And the advice I like to give to college students now is, professionally, when you're thinking about what you might want to do, find something that you love and that you're good at. So, for example, I love baseball, but I'm no good at it, which is why why I was not the third baseman for the Detroit Tigers. But I do like to write. I think I'm good at it, and so I went into it. And when you go into it, I think any kind of writer is probably a reader, probably one who enjoys books, aspires to write them, and I certainly did. I wasn't ready to write them right after I graduated from college. It took a few years, and finally I started doing it. But it's a kind of aspiration that I think any writer ultimately has.
I sometimes read books of different centuries just to see if I can understand them in part. And their sentences often are so much longer than ours today. And I'm thinking, how were their minds different that that we can't deal with long sentences, but they could? What did we give up, or what did we improve on? Have you ever thought about that?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I think about it in journalism a lot because one of the values we try to instill in students and then practice as writers is concision. How so the opposite of what you're talking about. How do you write with real concision so that you can deliver the maximum amount of information in a small number of words? And that's a thing you have to train yourself to do. There's an old story. It's apocryphal, and the line I'm about to share has been attributed to lots of different people over the years. The first time I heard it, it was attributed to Abraham Lincoln, and the line was something like this, or the story is something like this. He wrote a letter to a friend of his, and it went on for page after page. And at the end, he wrote, "I'm sorry this letter is so long. I didn't have time to make it short." And the lesson is that writing with concision, writing with brevity, and doing a lot with a little is hard. It's difficult, and you have to practice it because writing with lots of words, can be pretty easy, just to go on and on and on about something. Writing with concision is difficult. It's also a service to the reader. It says, I value your time, and I'm gonna share with you as quickly as possible what I know. The big shift in this occurred in the 20th century. When we think of ornate, flowery language, we're sometimes thinking of Victorian novels and that sort of thing. And as much as you can enjoy those, and there's nothing wrong with enjoying them, we tend not to write that way anymore, and that's everybody. That started to change with the modernists in the 1920s and the 1930s especially. Lots of reasons why this happened. Ernest Hemingway is often said to have a big influence on this, and of course he is honored and admired for his concision and his ability to do a lot with a little. But I also think it had to do with the rise of journalism and the need to put as much information in a limited amount of space on a page, and so it's changed the way many of us write, and now we've learned it even more with Twitter, with its character limits and text messaging and so forth. The idea that can how much can you say in as small a space as possible?
What I found myself, since I'm often dealing with people for whom English is a second language, as an aspiration really, that when I write things, I found that I impute that my reader is going to understand the culture and therefore understand the content without description. But because of the group I just mentioned, I find that I have to force myself to rethink and rewrite things as if I did not have that cultural savvy awareness.
Well, you have to know your audience, right? This is one of the first bits of advice you get from in a course on public speaking. It's something that writers are told all the time. Know your audience, and that can mean lots of things. So when I write for National Review, which is really where I've spent the bulk of my career in journalism as a professional writer, when I write for National Review, I'm assuming a readership that is college educated. And that means certain things, certain references you can make that you don't have to explain, certain words that you can use, that you're sort of writing at a certain kind of level. You get used to that too. But you make an assumption about who is your typical reader and what can you say, what kind of knowledge can you assume, and that sort of thing. I did an article, though, for Reader's Digest back in the 1990s, which used to be a great magazine. It no longer is, but it was an amazing magazine in the 20th century. And I really wanted to write for it. I wanted to become a contributor to it, and I ultimately wrote a single article for Reader's Digest. But it was a great opportunity, and I had this long deadline. I had 8 or 9 months to do it, and it was I had a budget for travel, and really worked hard on it. For a piece that was a couple thousand words long, and it was essentially about how are immigrants to the United States doing. And so it's a mix of anecdotal reporting, but also data, and just trying to paint a portrait of immigrant America. This was in the 1990s. And so I collected all the information. I did all my reporting. It took months and months. And then I wrote the piece and I sent it in. And I thought it was a pretty good piece that I wrote. And the editor that I was working with got back to me and he said, to John, this would be a great article for National Review or the New Republic, which was my first job in Washington, working at the New Republic. He said, this would be a great article for one of those places, but you need to understand that when you write for Reader's Digest, you have to write at the 6th grade reading level. And my jaw dropped. I'd never thought of that. I mean, I violated the first principle of, knowing your audience, right? And I just completely missed that. And I'm like, of course you have to do that. And I didn't really know how to do it. And it's not easy. It's hard to do really well. And this editor, because he was so good, he schooled me in how to do it. And he rewrote parts of it. He showed me what to do. And the piece was completely transformed. And it became a truly Reader's Digest piece. And I saw that when we were done editing it, when the thing was going to press, I thought to myself, this actually now feels like a Reader's Digest piece. And I was completely blind to that going in, which was maybe a silly thing, and maybe it's why they never hired me and asked me to do another one. But that was the reality. And then it really sank home. The lesson here really sank in when it went out in the published magazine and went out to America, with their millions and millions of readers. And my dad got it. And my dad was a longtime Reader's Digest subscriber. There was a moment when it felt like everybody in America subscribed to Reader's Digest. Well, he got the issue every month, and my dad was, he went to college and he was an engineer, smart guy, but he read National Review not because he wanted to read National Review. He read National Review because I wrote for it. He wanted to keep up with what I was doing. Well, he got this issue of Reader's Digest. He knew my article was in it. Sat down with it right away, read it, called me. He said, John, this is the best thing you've ever written. And I thought, wow, that's great praise, thank you. And I thought, I wondered why, and I thought, this was the magic of Reader's Digest, is it knew how to connect with an ordinary American reading public. And that meant writing at a 6th grade level. And that didn't mean that readers couldn't have handled more, but it meant that's what it did. And if you conformed to that, you'd be able to reach a large audience. And if you told good stories, you would have people who enjoyed your article.
Are there other magazines that are out now that require 6th grade writing skills?
I'm not sure. That's a good question. Reader's Digest it's still around, but it's not what it once was. And the variety of magazines is really diminished from the time when I got into this business professionally 30 years ago. You used to go to there used to be, magazine racks at the whole newsstands devoted to this kind of thing, or at airports you would see, all kinds of offerings and so forth. And seems to me like the offerings are greatly diminished from what they were. I think a lot of reading has migrated onto the web, the internet, people on social media, that sort of thing, and you're left with something else. So I think there are a lot of reporters who do try and reach large audiences. Wire service reporters, a number of news websites are probably trying to do that sort of thing, but there's a vast array of things online, writing for college audiences and high school audiences and on a 6th grade reading level, which to say 6th grade reading level is not to say you have the mentality of a 6th grader. It's just to say you're writing at a certain level that has a powerful way of connecting with ordinary people.
And then you started something to an organization to start bringing more truth to college campuses. Is it exactly the Student Free Press Association?
Yeah, so this is a nonprofit group that I founded a number of years ago, called the Student Free Press Association. It's best known for its higher education news website called The College Fix, and if you just Google that term, The College Fix, you'll find it. It's a news website about what's happening in higher education, written primarily by student reporters. And the idea behind it is, well, it goes back to my own background in college journalism, and the recognition that this is how I got my start, and thinking that we need a kind of model for now, and something that would recruit right of center students, conservatives, libertarians, and get them into the media. You know, one of the biggest problems we have in the media today is that it's dominated by the left, and that's in the newsrooms. It affects news coverage, and when we complain about liberal media bias, we can complain all we want. But the number one reason we have liberal media bias is not enough conservatives and libertarians go into the profession. So
Oh,
my thought was, how can we get more? How can we just get more bodies on the battlefield? And my solution was this news website where we seek to recruit people in college, encourage them in the profession, get them to write for us, train them up, offer them internship opportunities, make those investments, and then help them with careers and get them into the media. So I started the College Fix about 12 years ago, and we've done more than 100 internships in that time. We've printed thousands and thousands of articles on what's happening in higher education, covering cancel culture, covering religious freedom on campus, covering a variety of controversies and that sort of thing, reported by students, and now many of them have gone into the media. So the goal of the program is to report the truth about what's really happening on campus, but also create this talent pipeline of young people who can go into the profession and make it better.
so the Columbia School of Journalism and the one in Missouri, or wherever it is, supposed to be very good. Would they admit one of your graduates for a graduate program?
I have no idea. I'm not sure any have tried. You know, I discourage journalism school. The best way to learn journalism is to do it, to go into a newsroom and be a reporter, to learn it on the job. And so what we do here at Hillsdale College is we try to replicate that and create an experience with the campus newspaper where you do journalism and you learn it that way. Meanwhile, you're going to college and you're majoring in a real academic subject like economics or biology or something like that. And journalism's a minor, and journalism is then in its proper place. So that's how we do it here. Students sometimes ask me, should I go to journalism school? And I say, no. You know, we're teaching you everything you need to know and can learn here. You'll just take on a lot of debt. You'll go to courses and learn things that you could very easily learn in a newsroom by doing the job where you're earning money. And so I wouldn't say that you know these programs are worthless. I'm sure you can learn a lot, and they can be tickets to jobs and that sort of thing. But my advice is generally just go get a job. Go get a job in the field. Go learn how to cover cops and courts in your hometown. Go learn how to edit op-eds on the editorial page. Go learn this stuff, and that's how you can launch your career.
You know, in your wonderful book, Reading Around, you talk about your experience with Russell Kirk, which we were talking about before we started recording here. Would you mind talking about that again for our
Oh
audience?
yeah, I'm a great admirer of Russell Kirk, who of course was this amazing conservative intellectual, had a big influence on the shaping of the conservative movement in the 20th century. And when I was a student at the University of Michigan, I had an opportunity to meet him. He lived in Michigan, in rural Michigan, in a little speck of a town called Mecosta. And I was involved with a group called the Intercollegiate Studies Institute, which is still
Oh,
around. It's a really good group.
yes.
And it created an opportunity for me to go spend a weekend with him. And there were other students there as well, but it involved a seminar and so forth, and there were lectures and so forth. But the best thing was you got to meet Russell Kirk, this great eminence of this great public intellectual, this great writer, a guy whom I admired and so forth. And you got to meet Russell Kirk, and he signed a copy of my book, an important book he'd written. He signed a copy of it for me, and that was great. This was in 1990. He died about 4 years later, sadly. I met him one other time when he made it down to Ann Arbor for a lecture, but that was it. I met him twice. I did get to know his wonderful wife, who was many years younger than him. So she's Annette. She's a delightful person. She's a great conversationalist, a real social person. And I got to know her on that first weekend and just stayed in touch over the years. And she's still around, and she's running from Mecosta, from their old home in Mecosta. She's running something called the Russell Kirk Center for Cultural Renewal, which has some publications and activities and tries to keep alive the legacy of Russell Kirk and the idea of the permanent things, the great books and intellectual tradition and so forth. So it's kind of an educational center that works with students who come and visit and also puts out information and keeps Russell Kirk's ideas and writings alive for a new generation.
We learned a lot from John J. Miller about the Dow Journalism Program, which emphasizes facts, concise writing, and do it again. He also recommended going into a field that you love but that you're very good at. At the same time, he's a practice kind of guy and sort of picking up odd opportunities to try things. So in your life, try things. Go out and do something nice for someone you know and someone you don't know every day. See you next week.
To contact Junia, send her an email at juniadonsthespark@gmail.com. For more information, program schedules, and news about future guests, go to www.juniadonsthespark.com. Thank you for joining us. See you next time on Junia Doan's The Spark.
Local productions seen on Delta College Public Media are made possible with support from viewers like you. Thank you.